Hello everyone, welcome back. It's ripe again. Today's video covers how the president of a homeowners association, a woman named Karen, attempted to evict me from my 150-year-old family property and even tried to place a lien on it, despite the fact that I was never a member of her HOA. Let me explain exactly what happened. My house has stood for a century and a half. Those of you who enjoy history will recognize that its construction began just after the Civil War. My great-great-great-grandfather, I always lose track of how many greats he had, built it himself, with his own hands, after the war, had destroyed everything on his land. He rejected offers from opportunists who wanted to buy his blood-stained fields cheaply and instead brought his family back as soon as the house stood. Over the years, the house underwent renovations. Plumbing and electricity were added. Yet its original character remained strong. It was passed down through the generations, until it reached my father. I was only the second male in my family to be born in a hospital, my older brother being the first. Sadly, my brother lost his life in Vietnam, which made me the first man in the family to finish college. My father was a remarkable man, strict, hard-working, and deeply principled. An only child himself, he worked the farm from the time he could walk, yet still found the strength to bring home a young wife who partnered with him in running the place. Though he was tough, he set an example none of us could fault. He raised us on the farm, but unlike his own experience, he insisted we complete our education before taking over farm work. Once we finished high school, he wouldn't let us dirty our hands until we had college diplomas. He was proud of us, and we were proud of him. When I graduated, I moved to the city for work, but the farm always felt like home. Eventually, his health failed, and although the farm had not been profitable for years due to city expansion, he still refused to give it up. Seeing him bedridden was painful, and when he finally passed, we found peace in knowing he would never stop working, even in heaven. As the eldest surviving son, the farm became mine, and I considered it as much a part of my bloodline as any family member. There was never a question that I would move my family back, even if it added 30 minutes to my commute. By the time I inherited the property, developers had already built new suburban neighborhoods all around me. Realtors sent me endless offers, but I rejected them all, sometimes playfully turning their proposals into trophies. I even kept a wall of shame where I posted rejected contracts like hunting prizes, a billboard of failed attempts to buy us out. It gave me satisfaction, and I knew my children would carry on the fight. When the neighborhood finished building, the HOA letters began arriving. They urged me to join their association for my protection, as if my land needed their help. I dismissed them, pinned their letters alongside the real estate offers, and eventually the messages slowed. But one day, a new envelope appeared, different from the rest. This one carried a threat: eviction if I didn't pay so-called fees, along with notice of a lien they claimed against my home. According to them, I owed 5 years of missed dues to an HOA I never joined. I forced myself to stay calm so I wouldn't strangle the first person I saw. First step, call my lawyer. Second, confront whoever sent this nonsense. That led me straight into the heart of a sterile suburban neighborhood where I found myself across the desk from Karen, the self-important president of the HOA. Her house was a cookie-cutter model with a perfectly staged foyer. Sitting before me, with her heavy makeup and stiff perm, she looked as artificial as her manicured lawn. I placed the letter on her desk and asked her to explain it. She barely glanced at it, smirking as if she already won. "That letter," she said smugly, "is simply the proper legal process. Actions have consequences when people disregard their civic responsibilities." I responded, "What I'm unaware of is when exactly my home became part of your HOA, because I've never signed anything." She leaned back and with a rehearsed air of sympathy said, "I'm terribly sorry for your father's passing. I don't believe I ever had the chance to give my condolences. I had a good relationship with him, and before he died, he decided to make sure his land was cared for by joining my HOA. I pressed my palm firmly on the letter. My father ensured this land would be cared for by leaving it to me. The last thing he would ever do is surrender ownership to anyone else. I knew his opinion of HOAs well enough to recognize her story was a blatant lie. I demanded a copy of the contract. At first, she refused, until I made it clear I wouldn't leave without it. Eventually, she produced what she claimed was my father's signed agreement, complete with a notary witness. The signature looked convincing, but I knew better. The document was a forgery. I immediately contacted my lawyer to protect my inheritance. Karen, realizing she'd been challenged, retaliated by calling in an attack of her own. Within days, I was served with a lawsuit. According to her, I had violated the HOA's rules I never agreed to, and as a bonus, she accused me of assaulting her in her own home. What had started as an idle threat had now escalated into open war. She wanted my home immediately, and it was clear she would stop at nothing to take it. Not long after, my lawyer and I found ourselves in court. Karen arrived with her own attorney, fully funded by HOA dues, ready to fight. Her case was weak, but she was determined. I know I probably confused you all with that sudden twist, her suddenly taking the role of the defendant. The truth is, her lawsuit against me never even reached the courtroom. She tried to present a contract that my father had supposedly signed, and then she attempted to tie several of my rejection letters, many of which had incorrect dates, to notifications of past due payments that were allegedly sent to me. To make matters worse, she also produced a notice showing a lien had been placed on my property, something that apparently did not require my consent. In response, I revealed that my father had been in surgery on the exact day he was supposedly witnessed signing that contract. Even if he had managed to sign it, he would not have been in any condition to make sound decisions because of the anesthetics. On top of that, I showed them my entire collection of documented correspondence, every rejection letter and every official notice they had sent me, all meticulously copied and displayed. Faced with that, they quickly caved, removed the lien, and settled. But my lawyer and I weren't satisfied with such an easy escape for Karen. We began digging deeper into state regulations regarding the letters they had sent. That investigation revealed multiple violations, some so serious that they could be considered harassment. And if that weren't enough, we uncovered forged documents, along with financial records showing that the dues people were paying were being funneled into accounts Karen controlled, accounts not connected to the HOA at all. That meant harassment, fraud, and embezzlement. By the time we built the case, her rap sheet was quite impressive. When the tables turned and we brought criminal charges against her, it was clear she would never again be trusted with authority. If she ever makes it out of prison, she won't be running anything. And that's a reality I'm perfectly fine with. And now, Ripe Stars, let's hope Karen never gets her hands on another neighborhood again. She ruled like a petty dictator. But that chapter is closed. So moving on to the next story, here's how it begins. I'm a 33-year-old man who has been living in a quiet neighborhood in Estonia for the past 6 years, a few hours outside the nearest big city. I'm in a long-distance relationship and enjoying life as something of a modern-day cowboy. I've always admired American cowboy culture, so I've tried to live a lifestyle that reflects that spirit. Each household in my neighborhood has about 1.5 acres of land, but I was fortunate enough to purchase 2 side-by-side plots, giving me a total of 3 acres. It might sound excessive, but the space allows me to have my 2-story house, a small cowshed for my 3 cows, and 2 kennels for my dogs. I also run a small YouTube channel, not anything viral or crazy, but one day after seeing a video of someone strapping a GoPro to their dog, I decided to try the same thing with my cows. My neighbors loved it, so I eventually put cameras on all of them. It might sound random, but stick with me because this is where things take a turn. This whole incident started 4 years ago, back when I only had 2 cows. Owning a large property in a small neighborhood meant everyone noticed what I was doing, especially the local children. Now, don't get me wrong. I have nothing against kids, but letting anyone under 4 feet tall get too close to a cow is never safe. Thankfully, most of my neighbors respected this and only asked if their kids could play with my dogs instead. After a year of such thoughtful neighbors, I grew a little too relaxed. I told them they no longer needed to ask permission to let their kids play with my dogs. That was a big mistake. One summer, a new family moved into the empty house across from mine. At first, I was excited to meet them until I heard the constant shrieking of their children as soon as they stepped out of their minivan. Then, I watched their mother, a woman in her 40s, scream at her teenagers to quiet down while simultaneously barking orders at the poor movers unloading her belongings. 2 straight hours of shouting was enough for me to realize I was about to have a Karen as my neighbor. From experience, I knew it was best not to approach someone like that. Unfortunately, avoiding her turned out to be impossible. She didn't bother with the gate to my property. Instead, she walked straight up to my front door and knocked. Normally, I kept my gate locked, but since I'd told my neighbors they could visit any time to play with the dogs, I'd left it open. That was my mistake. When I answered the door, the conversation went something like this. Karen smiling stiffly. "Nice to meet you. We've just moved into that house over there." She pointed to the place across from mine. Me, forcing a smile. "Yes, I noticed. Welcome to the neighborhood." Karen. "Wow, you combined 2 plots. Must be a big family, right?" Me. "No, it's just me." At that, she looked at me as though I had just insulted her ancestors. Karen. 3 acres, just for yourself? Me. For me and my animals, yes. Karen scoffing. That seems like such a waste. Me, biting back my irritation. So what brings you over here? Karen. Oh, my boys love dogs, and I wanted them to play here. Right then, I spotted one of her teenagers throwing a rock at my dog, hitting him in the belly. I rushed past her, but before I could intervene, my other dog, watching from the porch, lunged at the boy. He didn't bite him, but he did grab the kid's shoe to scare him off. Karen shrieked, "Your vicious dog almost ate my son!" Train your animals. Me. My dogs aren't the problem. Maybe teach your kids not to throw rocks at animals. Karen glaring. My poor boy is traumatized. I'll let this go if you let my sons play with your cows. They've never seen one. Up close. Me. Absolutely not. If your kids can't behave around my dogs, they'll get trampled by my cows. Karen. So you admit your animals are wild? Me. Believe whatever you like. Now get off my property. She muttered curses under her breath as she left. I locked the gate behind her and immediately texted my girlfriend about the whole ordeal. She warned me that people like Karen never accept no for an answer, and she was right. Just 2 days later, Karen was back, yelling from the street, because the gate was locked. She demanded that I let her boys in to feel the calming energy of the cows. A nearby neighbor stepped in and politely explained that I never allowed children near my cows, but Karen brushed her off, insisting her sons were mature. I ignored her. This routine continued for 2 weeks, Karen showing up, shouting, and leaving when I didn't respond. One morning, after a long night at the vet because one of my dogs had an ear infection, I came home exhausted at 6 a.m. I brought my dogs into my room so they could rest near me. A few hours later, I woke to one of them barking at the window. Alarmed, I rushed outside, only to see Karen in the street, screaming at my cows. Several neighbors had gathered, watching. Karen stormed toward me, bleeding slightly from her forehead and palm. How can you keep such wild animals? They attacked me. Me. Why were they even on your property? Karen. My boys brought them over to play. But your cows went wild, broke my windows, and nearly killed my children. You're going to pay for this. Me, glaring. Pay for what? Your stupidity. She cursed some more, pulled out her phone, and threatened to call the authorities as I calmly walked toward her house to collect my cows. Karen screamed after me, "Don't you dare take them away from my boys, or I swear I will shoot them!" she yelled. I ignored her and kept walking, gently coaxing my beloved cows off her property and toward my own. But this Karen decided to block me, planting herself right in front of my gate to stop us from going in. That's when I heard the sirens. "Help! Karen! Help!" she screamed as soon as the officers stepped out. "He had his wild animals attack me and my boys. Look at what they did to my house." "Me?" I said, pointing at myself. "That's not true. She and her children broke into my property, coaxed my cows out, and then couldn't even control them. I have everything recorded. See these GoPros my cows wear?" I could see Karen's face drain of color. "Honestly, how dumb do you have to be not to notice cameras strapped to cattle?" The officers turned to me. "Why do you have GoPros on your cows?" they asked. I explained about my YouTube channel. My neighbors backed me up and I invited the police inside to watch the footage. That's when Karen panicked. She tried to bolt, but neighbors caught her two sons. She returned screaming, only to get caught by the officers themselves. "Sir, we'll need to take the evidence with us," the officer told me. "No problem," I replied. "Just get her away from me." The whole neighborhood stood watching as the screeching Karen and her wailing kids were loaded into the police car and driven away. At last, I guided my cows into their shed, letting a few children pet them as I checked them over. A week later, I got news that a restraining order had been issued against Karen. Even better, she'd be moving away from our neighborhood. I let out the biggest sigh of relief and thanked the officer who returned my GoPros. Since then, no more Karens have appeared and my cows have grown comfortable with children visiting them. And yeah, ripe stars, I've noticed a recurring pattern with Karens. They're not only detached from reality, but also from nature. Many of them seem to despise animals, and especially farmers. I don't know if it's some sort of mental issue or what. Have you ever lived near neighbors like that? Share your stories in the comments. Anyway, the next tale is titled Amazing Revenge. This one's about my friend Fred. He had been married for 20 years and took his wife out to a fancy anniversary dinner. That's when she casually dropped the bomb. She wanted a divorce. It was typical of her, always drama, always self-entitled, always picking the most humiliating time to deliver bad news. Instead of telling him in private, she chose a crowded restaurant so everyone could witness Fred's shock. To his credit, Fred kept it together. Their marriage had been rocky, and he later learned she was having an affair. Wanting to make the divorce simple, he created a full, itemized inventory of their belongings, gave her a copy, and asked her to check off what she wanted. At first, things were amicable, but soon the divorce spiraled into hell. Her demands grew more outrageous by the day, attorney fees skyrocketed, and eventually Fred just gave in to everything to end it. Fast forward 18 months. Divorce finalized. During that time, Fred had met another woman. They got married shortly after. One day, out of the blue, the ex-wife showed up in tears. The man she left Fred for had dumped her. Despite everything, Fred and his new wife were gracious and consoled her. Fred remained polite, but deep down, resentment simmered. Soon, she began calling him regularly, dropping by just to talk, even asking for money. During one call, Fred brought up the funeral plots he had purchased when they were married. Instead of lending her cash he knew she'd never repay, he offered to buy back her plot. She agreed, but demanded a ridiculous price, something like 20 grand. Fred was livid. Enough was enough. Then came the perfect opportunity. Her stepfather, a man she despised, died unexpectedly. She had cut ties with him years ago, but Fred had liked the man and even attended the funeral. That's when he learned there were no funeral arrangements, and money was tight. Fred stepped up. He donated his funeral plot, the one right next to hers. the very plot she had tried to sell him back for a fortune. She didn't attend the funeral, so she still doesn't know. But one day she will, and Fred grins like a mischievous child every time he tells the story. The next tale is titled, Petty Revenge. This happened nearly 5 years ago when I first became a concierge at a high-rise condo. Before that, I worked in the management office, filling gaps in an understaffed building. The concierge desk was no exception. Weekends especially needed coverage. I was given a pay raise to handle Sundays, 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. The work was straightforward. Answer phones, coordinate valet cars, handle packages. Sundays were usually dead anyway, since most residents were retired. I prided myself on 2 things: clear, detailed logs and keeping the desk spotless. But then came Terry, the weekday morning concierge. He grew jealous quickly, especially when he realized I could manage everything, guests, contractors, cars, without issue. One Monday, he waltzed in and complained that the desk was messy. Mind you, I had worked Sunday morning. I wasn't responsible for how it looked before or after my shift. Still, his jab annoyed me. So the next Sunday, I did more than my usual cleaning. I organized drawers, tossed old junk, and discovered a gold mine, nearly 400 business cards stuffed in there. They were obviously Terry's collection. Well, he wanted a tidy desk. So I gave him one. I threw them all out. Petty? Absolutely. But did I grin like a maniac when he asked about them the next day? You bet I did. And finally, the story titled, My Mother, the Mega Karen. This one's personal. My mother is the very definition of a mega Karen, and I endured her antics most of my life. This particular event happened when I was about 15. We went to a local restaurant with an all-you-can-eat buffet. Important detail, my mother had long, thick, curly hair, and she never tied it back. We got our food, sat down, and at first, everything seemed fine. I was honestly surprised at how well my mom was behaving. By this point, she usually would have found something to complain about. And then, it happened. She glanced down at her plate and suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my God, look at this! There's a flipping hair in my food!" I knew exactly what she was doing. "Mom, that's your hair," I said. No, that's not my hair," she snapped. The way she spoke was so exaggerated, clearly dramatized for attention, and she started getting louder, making sure the entire restaurant noticed. She kept escalating the scene, growing more irritating by the minute, and of course, the more attention she drew to herself, the more she dragged me into the spotlight as well. I just wanted to sink into my chair from embarrassment. Not long after, her fake tantrum began. The waitress came over. "How's everything going here? What seems to be the problem?" she asked politely. "There's a hair in my food," my mom declared. Okay," the waitress responded, calm as ever. That only made my mom angrier. "Well then, what are you going to do about it? We deserve to have our meals for free. This is horrible customer service." The waitress smirked, clearly unimpressed. "I'm sorry you're not satisfied with our food. Would you like to speak to the chef?" Mom, looking smug as if she had just won the battle, said, "Yes, I would, for sure." I sat there confused, wondering why the waitress didn't seem to care, even though I knew my mom was lying. But soon enough, I understood. A few minutes later, a man emerged from the kitchen and walked straight to our table. The moment my mom saw him, her face turned ghost white, her jaw dropping. The chef was bald. Not just balding, but completely bald, so shiny that you could practically see your reflection in his scalp. "Hi there," the chef said warmly. "How are things this evening? What seems to be the problem?" Mom stammered. "Well, there's a hair in my food," the chef smiled. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am, but unless I've miraculously grown a full head of hair during my short walk to your table, as you can see, I'm completely bald. And since I'm the only chef working tonight, that hair definitely isn't mine." "Mom, chef," he gave a polite nod. Is that all? I need to get back to work." Without waiting for her response, he turned and walked back into the kitchen. As he left, I silently mouthed sorry to him. I knew better than to say anything to my mom after that, but I couldn't help the smile that stayed on my face for the rest of the evening. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious. Do any of you have family members who act like Karens? I'm honestly grateful I don't, because if I had a mom, aunt, or relative behaving like this, I'd probably be furious. I mean, how would you even deal with it? After all, it's family. You can't exactly be cruel to them. With that, we've reached the end of today's story. If you can't get enough of my content, check out my endless playlist with thousands of hours of stories. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of my daily uploads. Thanks so much in advance, and I'll see you again tomorrow.